Hey everyone, welcome to Chuck Levin's Live, the first one in July. You'll notice Adam's not here. My name is Sam.
I say good.
Hi, Sam.
No, I'm kidding. I love Adam.
I'm joined by Dan on my right, Juliet on my left, and July kicks off our celebration of the 1970s in music. Mm-hmm. And I think first things first, we've got a new
New shirt drop.
shirt reveal. I know that a bunch of people have already seen these on social, on the website. They've already grabbed them. These will be available through... You follow me, Matt? Through...
Which way are you going?
I don't know. Which way am I going? Bobbing and weaving. These will be available all of July. After July is done, these shirts will be done. So you got a little less than a month to grab them.
Is that a conversion van on your shirt?
No, it is a band van, clearly.
Band
It's got
van.
instruments, amps, gear.
And it says, I'm with the band.
Yeah. Wow. So be with the band. Grab a shirt. So, what'd you do again?
We're live on YouTube and on Facebook.
Oh,
it's
we're only
fine.
live on one
This is
platform.
only for YouTube. by
Well,
the way.
Emery, are we going to
For all
restart?
of you elitists.
Good. Great. Excellent. Starting now? Okay, well. All right. Hello, everybody on Facebook, YouTube. Hope you're still with
Oh,
us.
you slackers.
Right.
Just join in.
All right. Where was it? Okay, so we're in the 70s.
The shirt review. The shirt review.
So we're going to talk about some of our favorite 70s artists. We're going to talk about some of the gear they played. We're going to talk about some of the gear that we have that either takes its design and theme cues from that, or stuff that has just been in continuous production since the 70s.
Yeah.
Where should we start, do we think?
The shirt reveal.
The shirt. We did the shirt reveal.
For Facebook.
For Facebook.
Facebook wants to see
Oh, right. Okay,
the
right.
shirt one more time.
Facebook. Pay attention. We got a new limited edition shirt, Celebrate the 70s, featuring the band van, the Chuck Levin's logo, all your gear. If you're in the band,
You're like
fingers.
pulling away in a hurry.
Can you tell everybody who's driving the van?
this van?
The van on the shirt.
Ooh, you have to get the shirt to find out.
French horn.
Yeah,
It is not a person.
right. So Facebook, this shirt will be available through the month of July. They're available now. Come grab them.
I will say no shade to all of our like other art. I think this one might be my favorite.
They keep getting better.
Yeah, they keep. I mean,
I'm just going to
all
say
good,
it.
but
Hot take maybe, but they keep getting
these
better.
ones are great.
I'm a big fan of this one. I'm going to walk out with this one.
Yeah.
Thank you, Falco Silva.
Yeah. Falco's killing it.
snaps.
Okay, so let's see. Where should we start with the 70s?
I think it's good to start with the actual music itself. I think
Artists and styles.
the artist and the way it was being consumed. I think like that's
okay.
an important
Oh.
feature of the 70s.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Tell me more.
8 tracks kind of took off in the 70s, which meant you
Okay.
could listen to
Tell me less.
some of your favorite
No, I'm
tunes in your car.
Yeah.
So whereas like before you had to go home and put your record on, or you had, if you're in your car, you had to wait for your favorite song to come on the radio.
Right.
You
You're
could
reliant
listen-
on DJs. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
You could listen to your
Portable industry
Right.
started.
And it was music on the go. Like you could listen to your favorite album all day if you wanted to. You didn't have to wait for it to come on while you're in rush hour or whatever you're doing. You could listen to your favorite music. So I think that changed the way that people consume music. It made music more popular, and I think some of the concerts got a lot larger. Like some of the Who concerts and the Grateful Dead concerts in that era were just gigantic.
And a lot
compared to-
louder.
Right.
Yeah.
Compared to anything else. So they had to change the gear to fit the venue. The venues were larger, so you had to produce more sound. Your amps had to be louder. And it changed the way people played because you had to make everything louder. I think that's one thing you have to keep in mind when you talk about like gear from the 70s. It was turning into this new thing where people just timed everything.
Right. Yeah, they had to. Yeah, they're
Right.
constant competition, always trying to keep up with one another. Yeah. Yeah, and I think you see that across pretty much the whole stage, right?
Right.
Everyone's trying to just brighter,
loud.
louder, more projection, right?
Right, and like solid state amps came out, and then like just things got a lot louder. PA systems got louder. It was a big deal. Then you talk about recording. The way they actually recorded the albums was different. The 24-track recorder came out, so they were able to basically isolate all the sound sources in 24 different tracks. And before they were limited to like 8 or
8 and
16. And then they had to shoestring things together. And there was a lot of bleed between the tracks, which made it sound a little thinner. There was a little bit of phasing there. So by separating the tracks and making them completely dry, people were able to record things with just a single sound source. And the mixes sounded a lot cleaner, fuller, bigger. Everything sounded better on tape. It was warmer. So you have to keep those things in mind. And then you talk about, like, when you start isolating sound sources, if you have, like, single coil pickups, you're going to get a lot of buzz. So, you know, like, the humbuckers became more popular in that era because they were a lot cleaner, and you wouldn't hear, like, things like that when you went to go record.
So humbucker would be an example of a technology that wasn't necessarily new in the 70s, but became popular due to recording and just kind of sonic preferences.
Sonic preferences, and like when you pair it with certain amps that are high gain, like you get a sound. And, you know, that sound just became really popular, and people wanted that sound. So in addition to this, you know, just wanting the tone or the sound, you know, you had to make sure it was clean so you didn't have a lot of buzzing and things to correct in mixes. So it made it easier to use a humbucker in a recording environment.
Cool.
Yeah.
So obviously a Les Paul is going to be kind of what most people think of first when they think of a humbucker. But other companies, manufacturers, started sticking them in guitars that either didn't have them or didn't exist before, right?
If you didn't have a humbucker in your guitar, you had to hop on the humbucker train. So, for better or for worse, some people hated it, some people loved it.
Right.
But, you know, for the most part, those guitars are iconic now, and I think they're part of history of the music that we listen to.
Yeah. I would love to maybe talk about how we ended up with, right, a humbuggy and some other iconic instruments. But let's get to artists that other people know, artists that all of us love, who are iconic of the time. Okay. So we think of a Les Paul, but who is playing that Les Paul? What does it actually sound like?
Who didn't play a
who
Les
didn't play Les
Paul
Paul
in the 70s? Everybody tried them. Go ahead. Who do we have here on the screen?
I feel like that looks like me after a shower. Okay, we have Led Zeppelin, obviously.
Well,
and Jimmy Page. Baby.
I think that is one of the most iconic, Les Paul.
Les Paul players on Earth.
It's iconic. It's what you saw on stage. It's what you see in all the pictures. That's it.
Yeah, that man I think sold and continues
still
to
sells.
sell thousands and thousands of these guitars to new and existing guitarists. Yeah, so.
Yeah, and the way he played on that thing, it was almost brutal. Like, he was not an articulate player, but he just, he powered through, and like I was saying, he wanted to project the sound, and he found a way to do it. And,
so he'd really dig in and and just attack the thing.
Yeah, he would beat the crap out of it every night.
Yeah, and it should be said, right?
Yeah.
These pickups tend to be hotter. So it's easier to push an amp that's already kind of dimed, and you end up with that super thick and saturated amp overdrive, which just I think became the sound of that whole era. Right?
Oh, it definitely did with the hard rock bands.
Yeah,
Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, The Who. Those guys are famous for these walls of sound that they put out in their live shows, and definitely in the records too.
And I think the Gold Top was actually a choice a lot of players made. It's definitely a 70s disco-looking guitar.
I love it. It's my favorite.
The guitars that these guys picked up in the 70s, I think initially would not have been made in the 70s because the Les Paul took, or at least Les Pauls as this one is
As we
presented.
know it, yeah.
Was on a bit of hiatus for a while there. And a lot of those guys, when they picked up the instrument, would have picked up a 50s or 60s example, or a 50s or 60 example of it. And they were probably at least partially, if not largely, responsible for Gibson bringing the original body
Bringing
shape
them
back,
back.
right? The original formula.
Yeah, I think it is interesting that a lot of the like instruments that have become so famous are oftentimes only made for a like year or two at a time, and then they kind of like dip down. But then because they're not expensive anymore and they're not in fashion, again, artists can actually afford them,
Yeah.
and they get another big push. And I mean, like, I think that that's what happened with those instruments.
Yeah, you see it time and time again. Yeah. Yeah. So humbuggies, right?
Well,
With
yeah,
G's,
humbuggies.
Right? Humbuggies.
Let's talk about the like telly. So,
Oh, this is so much lighter than that Les Paul.
Fender. So, I don't know the exact year, but Seth Lover, who like designed the Gibson PAF pickups back here on the other like Les Paul, was kind of snaked by like Fender, and he had this other like wide range. If you want to pan down to where my fingy's pointing, right here. These were his kind of like next step in that like pickup technology, right? And so Fender, I think it was like 71, 72, right? Was like,
so,
yeah. Like when they started to put these in, they started only in the neck because they assume that people want like the bridge to be like nice and bright and sharp, and they want like the neck to be kind of soft and more like mellow. But then at some point they like put them in both. Again, I think it was like 72, but I could be wrong. And now, yeah, look at that. It's Buddy Guy. Wow, I'm almost in the same outfit. It's perfect. And I think we ended up with a whole new era of artists that like maybe didn't love the like scale length of a like Les Paul or its weight or I mean any other thing, now had an option for these like types of high output like pickups, and it could like push amps differently. And so again, we're ending up with this whole new, oftentimes heavier or more clean sound. Look who's over here. Yeah.
If you can get close in on the pickup, the you'll notice the pole pieces on the three lower strings are on the top, and then
Are staggered a
the
little bit.
three pole pieces are on the bottom for the higher strings. And the attempt there was to get a cleaner, less muddy signal from these like the Fender pickups, so you could still get maybe that single coil sound from these pickups. And really, like it's been argued back and forth, but to me they sound similar to a normal humbucker.
To a normal.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Bold,
To me,
bold
I
choice
mean,
of words.
There's definitely some conversations to be had around
Yeah.
that subject.
Yeah.
It might be the hot take, but they sound similar to me. But you can get a little more high end off of them.
Do you know like what would be a fun experiment? To take these and stick it in a like Les Paul style and like
Careful.
scale length,
Careful.
and then
Careful
take
there.
those and put them in here.
Look
I
out.
do understand that the
Whoop.
like pole pieces that like there's some stuff there, but it would be cool to know if it's the like technology, is it the like scale length, is it the wood, all that stuff.
I think Fender realized that people would try that.
Yeah.
And if you notice the way that they screw in, there's two screws on either side of the
Yeah, so it's
of
like
the Fender
harder to
one.
just.
So, and there's one screw
Yeah.
on the Gibson version. So you could do it. You have to
Gotcha.
do some modifications though. It
We all
wouldn't
like
be
to
an
do
easy install.
Yeah.
So that's cool for me. So that's something I learned today. So like on the surface level, I think a lot of people will just make the one-to-one comparison between a Tele Deluxe and a Les Paul, because but it goes further than just having a pair of humbuckers and then two volume knobs. That's kind of that, and that's it. That's where the similarities end. It sounds like, because
Well,
the
they're
humbucker
both, like,
design is
solid
different.
bodies.
Yeah, But the humbucker design
Yeah.
is different. The
Yeah.
actual the character and the weight and the feel of a Fender, let alone a Tele, is going to
Yeah.
be distinct from a Les Paul. So the interface might be similar, but behavior and characteristics are going to be still different enough to warrant
Having both
yeah.
and buying both
I'm
from us here at
glad you said
Chuck
it. I was
Levin's.
going to say giving both a shot, but of course having both is much better.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have them right here on the wall. Come in the store and make up your mind.
Yeah, I love that. Oh, look, we have Keith, Richards here.
Oh,
He's
there he is.
playing the first one, which was the
My
Tele
preference.
Custom,
So just the neck,
just the neck humbucker,
right? Humbuggy.
which became iconic.
He's rocking.
It should also be said too, at this time period, right? Fender was. They were experimenting because they are still ultimately a what's the word? Parts caster, right?
Sure.
And they were experimenting. Here, you see that on this, they actually did put on a Strat neck. It has the big Strat headstock, but it actually was a Strat neck.
Right.
At the time, right? This big iconic, swoopy paddle.
Mm-hmm.
They were also doing this. I'm going to turn it around and swoop up. They were experimenting with this 3-bolt neck, which did not last very long because it didn't really work very well. But they were just trying new things inside of their kind of strict format. Look at these
Which the
70s buddies.
The Strats also had at the time, right? So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the point I think was to be able to adjust neck angle easier. But you end up
Sorry, Matt.
losing some of the
I think
strength there.
To be honest, I think it was partially aesthetic as well.
Really?
I do.
This nice kind of soft curve.
They had some competition in the era, and
I love that.
they had to spruce things up a little bit.
Yeah.
Make it fresh.
Cool.
There are a lot more import guitars making it into the United States around this time, right? So they did have competition from those
They did.
as well.
And department stores were selling a lot of guitars at the time.
Yeah.
Not humbuggy.
Right.
I'm sorry, guys, but yes, humbuggy.
Well, the Strat it went through a few changes in the 70s. We could talk about the 5-way switch.
Ooh, yeah. All right, Dan, let's talk about that.
There you go, big guy. Talk about it.
So the 5-way
Where
switch.
did it come from?
Well,
Started in the 3, right?
I'm not exactly sure.
Okay.
But
All good.
5-way switch essentially allows you to mix pickups. That's your neck, that's your bridge, that's the middle, and then you can go in between and match these. Also, a lot of players at the time were modifying their guitars for the phase. So they would take this switch and make these pickups go out of phase, which would make a quacky sound.
Yeah.
And that quack is what you hear on almost every disco song.
Every record. I also think it's cool because it was almost like the 70s equal to customer feedback, where this brand would hear of or see artists would always do the same mods. And so at some point, right, they're hey, should we pay attention to those people? And they did, which is cool.
Right. So they would put the mods right into the guitar. So I've also seen people put a switch for the phasing, so
that's cool.
you can change it in each position. So that was a popular thing to do in the 70s. But some of the Strats, they kind of have remained similar to the look and feel of the 60s, but and the 50s. But that's a big improvement here.
So
for this
who
guitar.
played a Strat in the 70s?
Oh, geez,
Iconic names.
I feel like it wasn't as popular as the Les Paul in the 70s.
Okay.
I think maybe there was a little bit of competition there between Fender and Gibson. But there were still a few players let me think here. I'm not coming up with any examples.
I
right
think
now.
there
She stumped
is
me.
one in Pink Floyd.
Oh,
David Gilmour.
there you go.
Was
There's one.
in my mind the 70s guy that played a Strat in rock and roll.
Right. And
That was him.
yeah, and he took it to a new level with Strats, and he started mixing them with the pedal we have over there, the big muff. He was definitely a Strat big muff guy, but he kind of would back off he would back off the sustain a little bit and use it in an overdrive setting, and then he would also turn it up a little bit here and there.
Yeah.
There it is.
Okay, so look, this is some of the Floyd setup in this like picture that also includes some other gear
What is that on stage?
that we have right here. All right, guys, do you see this? Look at that.
He's got a couple more than we do.
He has a few more. He has a few more, but I mean, who's to say what is better? But over here, we have the Mini Moog, which I think was used on the like Dark Side of the Moon album and tour, which is again like iconic Floyd.
So that's the Floyd Moog,
Yes.
allegedly.
That's not their.
No, it's not like
Okay.
the one that they owned.
Okay.
Actually, it is, and I'm gonna like take it home. Thank you, guys.
It's an iconic piece of gear.
Absolutely.
It came out in 1970, and it's been used on a lot of albums. I think I read the first one was a Sun Ra album. I forget. which
Oh,
one.
nice.
But great piece of kit. I mean, like it's still around. It obviously that shows you like how what a great
influential it
instrument.
was,
It's an
and
instrument.
like,
Right.
yeah,
Moog was like they turned synthesis into an instrument that you can actually play and becomes part of your sound, which was it was less of a sound effect and more of like part
like
of the song.
expression.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Like bands took advantage of that and that like their songs were structured and written around those synth tones and those synth parts.
It was made for players, and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like all the controls, like they made the knobs big enough so it's easy to twist
Mm-hmm.
as you're
Love
doing
that.
your thing. So yeah, very very iconic, and they're still around. Like you can still buy this one here at the store.
Yeah, that's wild. I also think the aesthetic of this era is just like really nice to look at.
That's what kind of stands out to me, and it's really apparent with the Mini Moog is we've almost come full circle. Where at the time I don't think there was anything quite like it, and as the 70s marched on into the decades beyond, there was a lot of other synths kind of popped up and came around. Now, when you think of a synthesizer, it's just a black plastic
Yeah.
candy bar with keys on it. And again, none of them
from this.
really look or sound like a Moog anymore. Like that thing has a wood enclosure. It's got hinges. All of the switches are light switches, essentially.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Nothing like it. Those are sweet.
Yeah, it's definitely it's actually like if you look at it, it's almost a piece of art. Like
It is.
Yeah.
you could set it
Piece of
on your
furniture.
shelf
Yeah.
and it would look good.
Yeah.
And
I think in some ways, right, like the 60s was almost, in terms of aesthetics, was almost like a time of maybe excess. And by like the 70s, we're into like a functional aesthetic, right? Like,
Sure.
like Dan said, everything is like labeled. It's all big. The like switches do like one thing at a time. It's easy to actually play and to like use. And with like some of these other like pedals, again, a like pleasing but a simple aesthetic was the vibe. Look at that.
There
Three
we go.
knobs, color coded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
this is not an actual.
Even I could use this thing.
Neutron.
Even Sam.
But this is a recreation of a very popular pedal in the 70s. It's a phaser pedal by a company called Neutron. They made pedals to try to make them sound like synthesizers. So you could make your guitar sound a little more funky. And I think
Well,
that's
here,
a good
can
way
I
to describe it.
ask you,
Yeah.
what exactly is a phaser?
I'm glad you asked.
Thanks.
So a phaser takes your sound source and it runs it through a series of circuits that are called all-pass filters. The all-pass filters basically chop off certain parts of the phase as it passes through, and then it puts it through an LFO, a low-frequency oscillator. So it gives it kind of a warbly sound. So it takes it makes it sound really thin and then warbly. So that's the best way to describe it.
Yeah.
without getting too technical.
Now, this clearly says mutation phasor. Is there a difference between a phaser and a phasor, Dan?
The pronunciation.
It's color and color. Yeah.
But this is a cool pedal by Warm Audio. It just came out. I personally am super excited about this pedal.
I
is
love
really
what
cool.
they have been up to lately with just like making like remakes of the old stuff in the simple way with all of the modern parts available. It's cool.
And they're accessible.
Yeah, and they're affordable. Like it's not like $10,000 for whatever.
And they look cool. Like a
Yes,
lot
I'm
of
sorry.
companies clone things and it doesn't look cool. Warm Audio always makes it look cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that thing feels good. Like it's not that thing has heft to it.
Yeah.
The knobs feel good to manipulate. Like kind of going back to the Moog thing. Like that is a fun pedal to interact with physically as well
Like
as
tactile.
sticking your guitar through it. Yeah.
Like, what are some songs of that era that were known for having like phase?
I mean,
on
Stevie
it?
Wonder,
Stevie
who's been
Wonder.
a customer of the store for a long time.
That's a fun story.
Higher Ground.
Another Moogman. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stevie Wonder. Yeah.
Higher Ground. There you go. There's your Mutron sound.
Love that.
Yep.
Like every Pink Floyd record.
Every
probably
Pink
has
Floyd,
phaser on
every
it,
Pink
right?
Floyd, even
Perhaps even every song.
even some of the like 70s funk was like a super like clean Strat, but with like a tiny bit of like slow phase on there.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Right. And it's one of those effects that people still use all the time.
All the time.
And it's not just like genre specific. It like everybody from like
Love
Radiohead to like I think Peter Tosh used one. You know what I mean? It's like it's not something that locks you into a certain sound. It's a cool effect.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
they would put the effect on more than just like keys and guitars. Like there's that stereotypical kind of like epic drum fill, and half the time they would put a phaser
Oh,
on it
really?
to give it that sort of like ethereal, like
I love
time
that.
portal sound to it as you
Movement.
run down the toms, and they just kind of go in and out of phase real quickly, and
That's
then
a
you're out of
sweet
it again.
idea.
It's just
Yeah.
real in and out. Start it at the beginning of the fill, end it at the cymbal crash, and then next bar it's back to
I'm gonna have
clean
to steal
drums.
that.
Yeah, that's a cool
Love
effect.
that.
All right. Well, what else do we have here?
We got this Echoplex here.
Okay. So tape delay. Tape delay was
What
really
is this,
popular.
Dan? What is this?
So-
Here, you hold it.
This is a delay. This is a recreation of a tape delay.
But inside of it, it also has the Echoplex like preamp,
Right.
which was
Which
the thing.
yeah,
thing.
and a lot of people would just turn the delay off and use the preamp just
Yeah.
because it had a particular sound. There were a couple other brands that were doing the same thing, like in the UK, like Grampian stuff was
Yeah.
really like people still like want those preamps
Wow.
just to run everything through. But the preamps sound great. This is a recreation, so you don't have to have actual tape
A
spooling
lunchbox,
through,
yeah.
and a whole large format guitar case size box on top of your amp, which is nice. So everything here, I mean, it's your run-of-the-mill analog delay, but the sound is a Pink Floyd sound.
Yes.
You're definitely going to get that with this. There are several on the market. I would say like the tape delay sound is a little bit more slow and warbly than like a digital delay, which is a little more bright and things of that nature. I think in the 70s, the first digital delay came out.
Ooh.
I believe it was a Lexicon, and I forget the model.
Ooh, yeah.
I should have researched that. But the first
We'll get
digital
to it.
delay did come out in the 70s, and that was opened up a whole new world of possibilities for delay
A
specifically.
whole new
Yeah.
world.
So
Okay.
that's a cool pedal.
It is. I also think I think last week we like talked about how the 60s they were like really starting to experiment in the studio with like tape everything basically, right? Like having that as a like overdrive and then like using echo and stuff. I think by the 70s we start to be able to like take those things out live, which is cool. Everything's just like becoming a bit more like maybe like mobile.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that still happens now, right? Like instead of having like a big box on top of an amp, now it's just in that pedal, right? But it's essentially like the same idea. It's like new tech, but we're aiming for like the same sound, which is cool.
Not quite as mobile as that, but aren't Zeppelin and the Stones both kind of famous for having like a mobile studio like on retainer?
Ugh,
And
they
would
probably
just
do.
drive
yeah.
it,
Then
right?
they had a
Right.
truck. Yeah.
Yeah, and they
Yeah.
would literally just pull up to buildings and record in them.
And record.
And the
What a
gear was
dream.
all in the truck outside or nearby at any rate.
You know, they experimented a lot with the places that they recorded too. Like,
Yeah,
some of
Zeppelin for sure.
Yeah, some of the like the rooms themselves just sounded great anyway, and then you put a microphone in there, and it.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, epic.
gave them the
70s
sound.
like reverb should be like an episode.
70s reverb.
Just
Yeah.
70s
Yeah.
reverb.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I mean, that stuff's cool. Also, just in terms of like pedals, while I think the 60s were kind of the start of them, by the 70s, all of like the big brands that we will talk more about who are still active all started. So things like MXR, Electro Harmonics, Boss, any others of like the big names that are still out and still like making insane stuff.
Still doing it.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot. Electro Harmonics.
Yeah.
Were they the 60s? They may have been the 60s.
Okay.
But a lot of companies did come out in the 70s for guitar too. There were a lot of like Asian manufacturers that had started producing guitars for Fender specifically and for Gibson, but then they started manufacturing their own, and then they became some of the popular brands that we sell now.
Yeah,
as
you
well.
see that across the whole industry.
Is that like
that
Roland in that era, or who is it?
Like, I mean, like Ibanez, like
Oh,
and
yeah.
some of those
Okay.
companies.
Yeah. 70s is when you would start to see like Tama, Pearl, and Yamaha drums also coming over. I believe Yamaha would have done guitars at some point, maybe not in the 70s, but
yeah.
for
And
sure.
Really, like Ibanez made some like really good Strat style guitars that sound more Stratty than
Than a Strat.
Yeah, it's,
Yeah.
it's amazing what was being cranked out.
What's what kind of gave all of them the foothold? They would do an iconic like formula of an instrument better than the one that created it,
Yeah.
and just kind of like took a lot of those manufacturers
You
to
know,
task.
that's
And the
a
ones
little
that
timely.
the ones that stepped up
Elon Musk and
still
Mark
kind of came. The ones that stepped up were still around, but there are a lot of them that kind of fell by the wayside as the new guys, gave them a run for their money basically.
Yeah. Do we like want to talk about cymbals, because you did
I would love to.
mention some cymbales?
Yeah. So
Look
bring
at
it.
my hats back here.
I mean, bringing it back to kind of what I was saying with the mobile studios with Zeppelin. The 70s is when you really saw Pisces cymbals kind of take
Okay.
over rock and roll.
Okay.
And they did things a little differently, which
How?
So,
Why?
oh, okay,
Where?
great.
When?
Okay.
Who?
Planet Earth, 1970s.
Okay. I'm in. I'm in.
So Dan, you were saying that the way bands kind of conducted themselves on stage, they were constantly one-upping themselves as far as volume output, brightness and tones and stuff go. So that's where Pisces comes in. They had previously done cymbals in the vein of like the Turkish and North American styles, meaning the bronze they used.
Okay.
But to get louder, they needed to do something a little more.
Change up the.
Yeah, they needed to change, switch it up, change it up. And Pisces' iconic 2002 series was developed in the 70s, which is a more copper-heavy bronze. It's a lot brighter, and the weights were a lot heavier. And these cymbals made their way into Led Zeppelin with John Bonham, into Pink Floyd with Nick Mason, into Deep Purple with Ian Pace, and that was kind of how these drummers, would keep up with the amplifiers. And Pisces is also noteworthy for a bunch of innovations, one of which is actually in this photo. You kind of see there those ridges on that
the
bottom
hat?
symbol. Yeah. And that was meant to
What does that do?
let more air escape, let more air pass through. So even when the hi-hats were closed, you would get a really, really thick closed hi-hat sound.
That's
That would
cool.
project a whole lot. And then likewise, John Bonham specifically is real famous for his timekeeping foot. That thing is just slamming while he's doing other stuff, and the ridges would prevent the cymbals from airlocking. And so every one of those foot chicks would be crystal clear, like a hand clap almost, and you wouldn't get the cymbal sound wouldn't get lost, which on a loud stage like Led Zeppelin was crucial.
Yeah.
So basically,
That's
the
cool.
70s, everybody turned it up to 11.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, everybody.
imagine.
Yep.
It was a loud concert
Everything
era.
got bigger, louder, heavier,
Yeah.
physically, sonically.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
gonna say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was not an era if you were not particularly strong. No good for you.
No, I suppose not. But yeah, that's the cymbals. Is there a
One
another
thing we didn't
instrument?
talk about yet is disco.
Oh, no.
Disco.
Disco.
Sam, how much do you love disco?
Disco's great. I love it.
Yeah, I
so
know.
much.
See, I told you. Okay.
I love disco too. I think part of like what disco turned into is hip hop into the 80s. Like it made a transition into new different types of music, electronic music.
Mm-hmm.
Just dance music in general.
Dance
That was
music.
kind of the 70s dance music, right? Like funk and disco, essentially. What
Yeah.
you dance to.
Yeah.
Hard rock, you just kind of jumped around
It-
and
It also
waved
was
your arms around, right?
it also was the golden era of DJs, right? Like
Ugh,
if you were like
yeah.
a DJ in a disco in the 70s, like think about that. Like that was big. But you can't talk about the 70s without talking about all that stuff. Some of the things that were popular in disco music, drum machines, like you had Roland producing some drum machines, some of the first ones. Some of the companies like Hammond organs, they would put a drum machine on their organ so you could play, and a lot of the tracks were recorded that way. So that's an important piece of music history in the 70s. But it's kind of revolutionized music and created like a whole new aspect to it that we didn't have before.
Nice.
Yeah, I think, I feel like after hearing all of this, it sounds like in the 70s, people like realized that there's so much that is like possible to be made, but also that it is an industry that's like maybe like worthy of like innovation, which is cool. Having all of these minds like building artwork that's also like technology instead of just being like regulated to kind of like musicians do that. It's cool.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but that branching out, you have a lot of looking at the music instrument industry. You have a lot more diversity in terms of. So when I think about this, I think about in the first half of the century, you have these huge music instrument companies like Gretsch that make everything.
Everything.
They make drums, they make banjos, they make guitars, they make concert percussion. They are distributing cymbals. Like they do everything. But when you contrast that with the 70s, and you have Fender makes guitars, Boss makes
And
effects
amps.
pedals and amps. There's a lot more specialization and company instead of like, for example, instead of Fender
cool.
doing drums and guitars and
Yeah.
turntables and synthesizers, right?
Being
It's
a lifestyle
a
brand.
lot of these companies are able to stand on their own, just doing the one thing that they do extremely well,
That's cool.
right?
And it's cool that like these instruments and effects and techniques that were developed in the era are still being used.
Yeah.
And we're making new genres of music with them. There's new sounds to be had. You can combine different things together that haven't been combined before. It's sort of we're talking about the 70s now, but you could be talking about the 2020s
Sure.
Yeah.
in a couple years
Yeah.
here.
Absolutely.
So it's for me anyway, like one of the cool things about working in this industry is we get to touch this stuff and like see it all and be a part of getting it to the artists. And I think it kind of ties in with our concert series that we're working on.
Yeah. The TGIF Summer Concert Series, powered by Chuck Levins and presented by the city of Wheaton. So what Dan's talking about is in July and August, every Friday, we will be partnering with the city of Wheaton and hosting a summer concert series. Music is going to start at 6 every night. The first concert is tonight.
It is.
Tonight, this very night at 6 p.m. We've got a local brass band, Black Masala, who will be, from what I understand, tearing it up.
Tearing it up. If you haven't
Right.
seen them, be prepared to dance.
Yeah. It'll be a good time. There is food. There are drinks. It is
also free.
It is very free.
Y'all,
you literally
stop
just kind
on
of
by.
walk up, show up, and start dancing. The best kind of concert.
Come out and see the bands that we'll be talking about in 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Also, it's cool to be able to like talk about all of this gear, right? All of us love gear, but it's pretty cool to be able to celebrate like local artists who are actively engaged in like making art out of all of this stuff,
Yeah.
which is cool.
Yeah. Playing and performing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is what all this is for. Yeah, man.
I mean, but it's like fun to touch. Look at that. But its purpose is to be heard.
Yep. Well, yeah, I think that's a great place to close it out. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. We'll be
Thanks, guys.
here
Thank you.
next Friday, same bad time, same bad YouTube channel and Facebook page. We'll see you all out there at the Marion Friar Plaza tonight to see Black Masala. And I think that'll do it. So, peace, y'all. I've been Sam. This is Dan. This is Juliet.
Sam,
We'll see you
Dan,
next week.
Juliet.